Welcome, Pod.
Welcome back into TCM Pod. Got a weird setup here today, but we got a lot of news to get into. I pulled a Spencer today. I'm having to use my phone to be on the podcast right here, TCM Pod. But Chris Mathis, Spencer Mathis back here yet again with the latest from, of course, the world of sports and in particular the NFL after week one. Week one is officially in the books. Of course, a couple of upsets along the way as the New York Giants were blanked. Spencer's putting on a light show out there. That's called SpongeBob right there. But yeah, the Giants were blanked. We saw the Buccaneers pull off what I believe to be an upset in Minnesota against the Vikings. A couple of other big games too. In particular, of course, in the AFC, we saw the Miami Dolphins take care of business against the Chargers. Tua looked phenomenal in his first game back as the starting quarterback with the Miami Dolphins. But ultimately, you guys just tuning in, it's still very relevant. Aaron Rodgers, Monday Night Football, the scene was set. It was 22 years to the date on Monday of September 11th. A horrifying attack on the United States happened in that situation. And 22 years later, on Monday, Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets, that's right, not the Packers, the Jets, hosted, of course, the Buffalo Bills there in Jersey. It was a perfect scene, perfect atmosphere. Aaron Rodgers trotted out onto the field with the American flag. All the lights were dimmed there at MetLife Stadium. It was awesome. It was set up to be an incredible night there at MetLife Stadium, and what we all believe to be the start of what would be an incredible, I don't know, 2 or 3 seasons for Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. Unfortunately, it lasted four plays in which Aaron Rodgers was slow to get up, got up, stood up for a second, then set back down on the ground. Next thing you know, he is making his way to the sideline, gets carted from the sideline to the locker room, and the rest is history. Aaron Rodgers, the 39-year-old veteran quarterback, his first year with the New York Jets, already done. His season is done for, facing the injury. I'm not a Jets fan. I'm not even a huge Aaron Rodgers fan, but I was excited to see this. I was excited to see him work with such a young group of talent. And we all saw on HBO Hard Knocks the chemistry that was already there with the Jets, with Robert Saleh, with the receiving core, with the defense and Sauce Gardner and a couple of other pieces too. And Aaron Rodgers now in the mix, a team that arguably had one of, if not, one of the most prolific defenses in the NFL last year. However, they had spotty quarterback play and Zach Wilson. They lost 6 consecutive games to close out the regular season. They bring in Rodgers for what was to be a very exciting 2023, and he's out. What were you thinking, Spence? Obviously, you're a big Aaron Rodgers guy, but more importantly than that, we were just watching football, and I know that you had your eyes glued to the TV as well. What were you thinking in that instance in which Rodgers went down?
Yeah, that's one of the worst injuries I've seen. Not in terms of how bad the injury was, but in terms of just how quickly, like the air of a stadium, the air of the league, everything was just wiped out instantly. Like you said, all the hype surrounding the New York Jets. That would be like whenever Peyton Manning joined the Broncos, first game out for a year, maybe even done for his career. That'd be like Tom Brady, 40 years old, 42 years old, with the Buccaneers in 2020, that eventually ended in a Super Bowl. Just going out there and tearing his ACL in the first couple of plays. I mean, I just couldn't. I can't imagine how the New York Jets fans are feeling today. I mean, if that happened to Tom Brady with the Buccaneers, I would just be completely sick to my stomach. I don't know if I'd even be able to turn on a game for the rest of the season. I know I wouldn't have finished last night's game if I was a Jets fan. Luckily enough, they won the game. Their defense is prolific. That's an upside for them. But I mean, how far do you see the Jets going without Aaron Rodgers? I mean, I don't see them going far, of course, with Zach Wilson at quarterback. Of course, he didn't look terrible last night, but Rodgers, I mean, if he plays a full season, just like on Hard Knocks, you saw everybody rallying around this guy. Saleh, the head coach, was saying over and over again, "We finally got a guy. Look at us. We're going to be in every single game by one score this year with Aaron Rodgers." He's gone in 4 plays. Of course, they're still in the game against a good Buffalo Bills team because their defense is incredible, led by Whitehead at safety, who had 3 interceptions. But Zach Wilson down the stretch this season, I don't think he's going to be able to make the playoffs with them. I mean, he may sneak in, but I mean, obviously, he's not a guy that's going to win you a playoff game this season, of course. So right now, if you're the Jets, and at least the reports coming out right now is that you're looking at free agent veteran quarterbacks and maybe even inquiring on some of these backup quarterbacks that are available for play. And I think you'd be more comfortable going with a guy that has a little bit more experience than Zach Wilson because, man, if Robert Saleh has a bad season there in New York, regardless of this injury, he may have another year after this season, and then I think that's about it because he's had the same exact start to his Jets career as Todd Bowles did, who was fired pretty quickly there in New York and eventually became the Buccaneers defensive coordinator and now the head coach. But same exact start there, and they don't have a quarterback. Obviously, a big win versus the Bills, but the turnover-prone Buffalo Bills. How much do you weigh into that in Week 1? Of course, you won on a punt return touchdown. Are you going to be able to win the big games down the stretch? I don't think so with Zach Wilson. And I think you go out there in free agency and sign somebody, or you maybe even trade somebody because your window's not very long here if you're the New York Jets right now, and maybe trading even a first round pick if you really feel like that's the guy you want to go for could be the thing with some of these teams that obviously want to tank next season for Caleb Williams. And I think a big storyline today, if the Rams wouldn't have won by so many points yesterday against the Seahawks, would be, hey, why don't the New York Jets trade for a guy like Matthew Stafford who has 1 or 2 years left? If you think Rodgers is going to retire, that's something that I think both teams would be happy to do because the Rams would love to get rid of that contract. And I'm sure with this injury with Rodgers, some of the years are going to be void, or at least they're going to get some cap relief based off of an injury that happened in 4 snaps. I'm sure there was a snap incentive for this guy. But if the Rams wouldn't have won by so many points yesterday, what are the odds that we'd be hearing the fact that the Jets would be reaching out to the Los Angeles Rams right now and saying, hey, let's get Matthew Stafford here. He's a guy we can rally around. He's a guy that can make the big plays. He's already won a Super Bowl for one team. Let's see what he can do for us. Instead, they won. So what are you going to do if you're the Jets? I mean, I'm going to ask you that question. I don't know what you do if you're New York right now. That's probably the most unfortunate injury I've seen. And I know the DeMar Hamlin injury last year was terrible. Obviously, that's the worst injury we've seen on a football field in recent history. But just the impact of this injury with a guy like Aaron Rodgers is just heartbreaking for Jets fans.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of questions going around. Of course, the Jets locker room. You have to question as far as how the team feels because there was so much juice, so much energy coming into this season for the Jets. They had a veteran quarterback that's a 4-time MVP, and Aaron Rodgers coming in. He was rejuvenated. He looked excited this year. We saw a different look, Aaron Rodgers, coming into what was training camp, what was preseason. He was coaching up Zach Wilson as well, which is why some Jets fans and why some football fans across the country and across the world believe that maybe they will stick with Zach Wilson at quarterback. And they may just do that no matter what. They may ride this out because they think, hey, Zach Wilson was going to be our guy no matter what if Aaron Rodgers didn't come to New York, or when Aaron Rodgers hangs up the cleats, Zach Wilson was our guy. Maybe this just pushes along that process of having him back in the helm. And, I don't think that spending an offseason and a training camp and a preseason with Aaron Rodgers can do that much for Zach Wilson. This guy, he just doesn't look comfortable out there. He's athletic, but he just doesn't look comfortable out there, in my opinion. And you see him take some hits, and he gets sacked a good bit. He hangs on the ball a little too long for my liking. But at the same time, if he can simply be a game manager and get the ball to the playmakers, they have playmakers there in New York. They have Dalvin Cook. They have Breece Hall. They have another really good tailback there as well. I'm blanking on his name right now. And then a very, very good receiving core as well. Adam Lazard, of course, Garrett Wilson, as well as Randall Cobb. And the team is just loaded on offense, too. Now, defensively is their bread and butter. It's an elite defense. However, they need a quarterback that can be a game manager and just protect the football, but more importantly, get the football to his playmakers. And I like a guy that maybe has prior playoff experience, a guy that is truly a QB1 in the National Football League, or a guy who's been there, done that, even if he's a free agent now, or even if he wasn't going to be a starter this year until this opportunity arose. I like a guy with experience to come in and be the quarterback for the Jets. So, there's been some talk of, this is going to sound crazy, but maybe a Carson Wentz coming to the Jets to take over, or at least being in that quarterback room with a guy like Zach Wilson. Now, Carson Wentz, he had an MVP-like season, then got injured. Obviously was going to the Super Bowl, and then Nick Foles came in and won that Super Bowl Lombardi trophy. However, Carson Wentz has had some success. We saw a lot more bad from Carson Wentz, but when he was healthy, when he was in the right situation, he was really, really good. So that's somewhere that, maybe the Jets would trouble. He is a free agent. Another guy that we might look to is, it's going to sound crazy as well. What about Jameis Winston, who's now with the Saints? He's riding the bench there. He's an $8 million a year quarterback riding the bench behind Derek Carr. I don't know if I believe in Derek Carr super, I guess I could say too much to think, hey, you know what, let's go ahead and ship off Jameis Winston this early, I would hang on to Jameis Winston if I were the New Orleans Saints. However, if they could get, I don't know, maybe a third or fourth round draft pick for this guy, I think I would pull the trigger on this. And if I were the Jets, I think I would do so as well. Now, I do know that he does have his fair share of turnovers. It's obvious. It's obvious that that's possible and that that's something that is very likely with a guy like Jameis Winston. However, we also know of a quarterback by the name of Josh Allen who's been deep playoff runs year after year after year. They have a very good defense. They have a prolific offense with playmakers that also is a turnover machine, and he's been deep in the playoffs. So maybe a guy like Jameis Winston could be the guy for the New York Jets. I just don't think that you can put your money or your trust in Zach Wilson carrying your team to the promised land. Now, maybe squeaking into the playoffs, which honestly, Spencer, I'm one of those guys that had, I took down some notes. I'm one of those guys that had the Jets squeaking in as one of the three wild card teams in the AFC this year. I had the Bills winning the AFC East. I did not have the Jets winning that. So now that was with Aaron Rodgers. Now that Aaron Rodgers is no longer in the picture, you know, they're a fringe wild card team at best. And if they make it to the wild card, they're not winning that game. I thought before the Jets, they could win the wild card. I think that's out of the question now with Zach Wilson at quarterback. And I'm not sure that there's a quarterback out there that really makes me feel any differently about that situation, about a playoff push for the Jets. A good defense, good offense, but they have to figure something out. And I would give my advice to the Jets would be to give Zach Wilson a few weeks. Maybe you do bring in another quarterback no matter what. Go ahead and do so. But you give Zach Wilson 3-4 weeks to prove that he can be the guy. And if he plays decent, more importantly, protects the football, he's your guy. Otherwise, you give the guy you brought in, the guy you either signed or traded for, that opportunity.
Yeah, look, if I was a New York Jets fan and I got the notification that my team, the New York Jets, and the GM went out there and signed Carson Wentz, I would probably throw up on my phone screen or my laptop screen because that's not a guy you can rally around. We've seen Carson Wentz in so many situations. The dude stinks. The dude has no potential. He's done, in my opinion, in the NFL, at least as a starting quarterback. But a guy, like you said, your second option, I think, is a guy that you can rally around at least. He's a guy who's a good leader. That's what they're going to need right now. They're going to need a leader. Anybody can get behind Jameis Winston. Even whenever the Buccaneers were absolute dog crap, is what I'll say. Jameis Winston was a great leader. Obviously, he was making a lot of mistakes. Obviously, if you go back to that 30 interception season, not all 30 interceptions are going to be on him. I would say at least 12 of those tipped off his receivers' hands. He would have had a normal 18 interception season if his guys could make the 50-50 catches because obviously he trusts his guys. Some of his guys didn't make the catches at that time. They had Rashad Perryman. Godwin and Evans were, of course, the two best, but below those guys, who did you have at receiver? I mean, not great targets. The tight ends for him weren't great. If he were to go to the New York Jets and be reunited with Dalvin Cook, get to play with Breece Hall, get to play with Garrett Wilson, they've got a pretty decent tight end there as well, a rookie tight end that could be good in Kuntz. I mean, if you're the New York Jets and you're really going out there and you want to get a veteran quarterback, you don't have enough money to get a good one. I'm obviously Jameis Winston is not a great veteran quarterback, else he'd be a starter in the NFL. You don't have enough money to get a good one, but like you said, a third or a fourth round pick is enough to get Jameis Winston probably off the New Orleans Saints. And what are you paying? You said $8 million. You remember you had $25 million that Aaron Rodgers saved you against the cap before the season started. That was the big thing. So now what? You have $17 or $18 million after you get Jameis Winston. Sign another receiver because you're going to need one more target for whoever comes in. Rodgers could work with that, but whoever comes in next cannot work with that receiving core because there's only one really good target as the other one left last year in Elijah Moore. So we'll see exactly what the New York Jets are going to do. But this blasphemous talk about Tom Brady coming out of retirement and playing for the New York Jets, did you not see what the hell happened to Aaron Rodgers last night? A more mobile quarterback than Tom Brady. One snap on that New York Jets team, I think he'd suffer the exact same fate on a wet field. And that guy on Twitter last night called it. He tweeted out at 6 o'clock. He said, hey, 40-year-old quarterback, wet turf field, MetLife Stadium, known for all these injuries. Aaron Rodgers is going to tear his Achilles in exactly 2.5 hours. And guess what Aaron Rodgers did? Tore his Achilles, and guess why? Pressure in his face. Immediately, obviously, he had a guy open quickly. Sometimes you don't want to take the first read. People don't understand that maybe. It's Rodgers. He can do whatever he wants. Didn't think that injury was going to happen. It ends up happening. So if they're going to sign a veteran quarterback, it's not going to be Carson Wentz. It's got to be a mobile quarterback. I think Jameis Winston's mobile enough in that offense, and I like him a lot. Of course, we're obviously Bucs fans of the past with Jameis Winston being the quarterback. But I would love to see Jameis Winston 5 times this year on primetime over a guy like Zach Wilson because Zach Wilson may be a good quarterback in the future. I think Rodgers could have taught him a lot over these next 2 years, and he could have been a good predecessor of Aaron Rodgers. But now, what are you going to do? Because is Rodgers going to be in the building this year? Wilson's not ready to start. And I think we all know that as NFL fans. We saw last season. You saw the season before. He needs at least one more year. And if you sign a guy like Jameis Winston and he does good, it's just like the Geno Smith situation last year and you make the playoffs and you're fine. That defense is good enough to overcome turnovers if Jameis Winston does have a couple of games where he turns the ball over a ton, because with him, it just comes in spurts. Like there's a game where he'll just throw 5 interceptions in London against the Carolina Panthers, and the next week he throws 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, and just 1 interception. That team with Jameis Winston could be pretty good. I think he's at least going to bring – they need buzz in New York. And Zach Wilson right now with the New York Jets, 0 buzz. So they've got to get somebody out there, regardless if this guy's going to start or not. You need something surrounding your team, because if you don't sign anybody and you're the Jets of last season, you're the same old Jets. Who else did they get in the free agency this year besides Dalvin Cook? Are you even a different team if you have Zach Wilson out there again? I don't care how much he learned in 6 months under Aaron Rodgers. He's not ready. They're going to have to get a new quarterback. And I'm excited to see who it is, because obviously they're going to get somebody, or else these reports of them not looking for a free agent quarterback, or maybe even looking to inquire to trade for a quarterback. Those reports wouldn't have came out if they're not actually trying to get a quarterback to replace Zach Wilson, because you heard it in Hard Knocks if you watched it. Robert Saleh is not high on his quarterback, Zach Wilson, at all.
No, not at all. No, it's pretty obvious. And Saleh, I like him as a head coach, but I have to see more from him. He sounds like a guy that wants to win. He's just got to win. And I thought this was going to be the year. He had the quarterback to do so. Now I don't feel so confident in what they have there in New York. Even though the defense is so great, we do know that offense is vital in the playoffs, which is a total flip-flop of what it used to be back in the day. So my personal opinion, when you talk about a guy that brings buzz, Jameis Winston is the perfect epitome of a guy that brings buzz. There are still people today, as you guys can see, I'm at 953 WDAE, the studio. There are still people today in Tampa, Florida, that talk about Jameis Winston, and they'd rather have Jameis Winston than Kyle Trask or Baker Mayfield. It's been 3 seasons, 3 or 4, since Jameis Winston was here in Tampa Bay. His last pass was a pick 6. His first pass as a Buccaneer was a pick 6. And they still want him. Then there's a flip side of the guys that hate him and absolutely disparage you for even mentioning his name on the radio, which happens to me all the time, but it's true. He's a realistic option. I think that Jameis Winston would be fun. Even if he's not the starter, bring him in and push Zach Wilson. This guy learned a lot from Drew Brees. He learned some from other players throughout his NFL career as well. Why not bring that to New York? And you know what? Zach Wilson would feel a little bit of pressure in a good way. I want to end up with this New York Jets talk with, I think Aaron Rodgers is done. I do not think that Aaron Rodgers really even attempts to come back and play for the NFL or play for the Jets. He's 39 years old. This is going to be a very difficult injury to come back from. I know that he was juiced up for this year, but typically speaking, from the outside looking in, you didn't think that of Aaron Rodgers when it came to the start of the football season. You didn't see a guy that was excited for preseason or training camp. We saw that this year, and then you see what happens. The one time he changes his fate, he gets injured, 39 years old, plays 4 snaps as the Jets quarterback, done for the season. So number one, it's going to take him a while to rehabilitate, to get back in the mindset of even walking. Number 2, he's going to get back there behind that offensive line. And number 3, get right back in game shape, and I hope that this doesn't all happen again. What say you on that regards? I think that he's done.
Yeah, look, he's 40 years old at this point. I think that we're going to learn hopefully a lot if he still goes on the Pat McAfee show, which is now on ESPN. If he goes on the Pat McAfee show soon, I think that's whenever we'll get the at least the feel for what he thinks he can do as a 40-year-old quarterback heading into next season. Obviously, if he sticks around, you're going to sign an offensive lineman in the offseason with that money you have left over, and you're going to draft an offensive lineman. But the fact that they didn't get one before the season started, I think, was a big mistake for the New York Jets, and I think we're seeing it. Obviously, this freak injury isn't all because of the offensive line. It's just this kind of stuff can just happen to anybody. But the offensive line played a part in it. Rodgers was obviously complaining about the offensive line during training camp, and the front office with the $25 million in hand kind of didn't do anything about it. And now you're kind of seeing what the end result is. No happy people, even on a victory in New York today. If you're a Jets fan or a Giants fan, Jesus, they got absolutely mollywopped. But nobody is happy in New York today at all. I don't care. Obviously, the Jets won last night. You're still thinking, hey, we're the exact same team as last year now. Rodgers didn't even get to complete a pass in our jersey. This is the saddest day for New York Jets fans in terms of football. Um, I mean, they haven't been relevant in so many years. It's been at least 15 years since they've been relevant with Mark Sanchez, or about 15 years. And now you've got nothing. And even then, you're a quarterback away. Guess what? You're a quarterback away again. And hopefully, I think regardless of who they sign, hopefully they get Rodgers back next season. Obviously, he's going to be 40 years old. I think you could still play. The thing is, at 40 years old, are you going to be able to recover as quickly as these younger guys? I think you're going to need to get in with Tom Brady if you're Aaron Rodgers, regardless of if you guys have beef or not, some unspoken beef that we don't know about. You're going to have to get in with Tom Brady. You're going to have to learn what to do. Or you can go the Aaron Rodgers route, smoke some ayahuasca, put some dirt on it, and just do some seances by the fire, and maybe you could heal a little bit quicker. So you never know with Aaron Rodgers, with his herbal treatments and things that he has going on. Maybe we see something. Maybe we see a miraculous comeback by the start of next season. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that aspect. This guy goes that distance, goes the extra mile in regards to all that, and he does his homework. Whether it works, it's up for him to decide how it impacts each individual.
Yeah, maybe time for another week-long darkness retreat for him, and maybe it just miraculously heals. Obviously, they already put him out for the season. You never know. What if this guy comes back by week 16 and plays in the playoffs for you with some modern medicine that he's created himself in a lab with Joe Rogan and Alex, what's his name? Alex Jones.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so we'll move on now as we round out TCM Pod here this week. The Buccaneers, they come off a big win, 20-17 on the road in Indianapolis. I thought that they were going to lose about 31-13. My prediction going into it, they proved me wrong. I think it was Baker Mayfield, number one, taking care of the football. Number two, the defense played well. Yeah, Justin Jefferson got what he was going to get. He balled out, especially in that first half. However, most of that came when the Buccaneers were playing that zone defense. When it was man coverage, the Bucs held them to under 65, 70 yards, which I'm fine with all day when it comes to the best receiver in the NFL. And then the Buccaneer defense was opportunistic. A couple of takeaways, too. They got in Kirk Cousins' face. They pressured him throughout the whole day. It was all in all just a great performance, and I love the gutsy calls by Todd Bowles.
Yeah.
It was a new look Buccaneers. I didn't expect Todd Bowles to go for it. I didn't think Todd Bowles would challenge that spot. I didn't think that he would send out Chase McLaughlin to kick that 57-yard field goal. He did all three things, Spence, and the Bucs win 20-17 in week one.
Yeah, I was proud of him, and I'm not going to lie. Whenever they said the Buccaneers are going to send out Chase McLaughlin to go kick a 57-yard field goal, immediately I was cursing at my screen. I was by myself watching the game, and I was like, "There's no way this guy's about to drill a 57-yard field goal. The game is tied. You're near midfield. This is a terrible decision." And guess what? He goes out there. He probably had 6 or 7 extra yards on that field goal. That was a perfect kick. Put the Bucs ahead. And then 4th and inches from your own 30-yard line with 5 minutes to go, and you go for it. That's not the Todd Bowles of old. Those were great decisions. He did a good job with timeout management as well. Made the Vikings use one of their timeouts in a situation where they were kind of confused in what the Bucs were going to do on that 4th down. Vikings called a timeout. Guess what? Baker Mayfield sneaks it back up the middle. And I think Baker Mayfield had a good game. And I think one more thing that we should talk about after this little part right here is the new quarterbacks in the NFL and how they performed. Just a little rundown of that as well. But Baker Mayfield's second half looked great. And the thing is, right now, if I'm the New York Jets, if I were the New York Jets and let's say we're in a different reality, Baker Mayfield's unsigned, I would be saying go get Baker Mayfield or Jameis Winston. Right now, your only option for the Jets is Jameis Winston because Baker Mayfield's 1-0 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he had a great performance, a gutsy performance. And that's all he's going to have to do this season because, damn, the Bucs defense looks good again. Just like I suspected, I have them in both my fantasy leagues. No homer there. They were ranked as the 25th defense in the league. I'm just wondering what the heck the thought behind that was. I started them yesterday against or Sunday against the Vikings, and I knew that they were going to have a good game. Didn't expect the 3 turnovers, but they did it, and they played a great game. And I kind of expect that down the stretch, and especially next week versus Justin Fields, who hasn't made a lick of progress as a quarterback, and neither has the Bears as a team.
Well, I think that the fantasy leagues, the fantasy companies, ESPN, Sleeper, of course, Yahoo Sports too, I feel like maybe they were putting the Buccaneers defense a little lower on the rankings because the offense was terrible last year. They lost Tom Brady. They can't run the ball. They lost the center Ryan Jensen. So I bet that they were banking on the defense to have their backs up against the wall in bad field position a lot. Fortunately, was not the case much whatsoever against the Minnesota Vikings in week one. And the Buccaneers also did a great job of hanging onto the football, chewing up clock there in the fourth quarter, which all in all, I was very impressed with Todd Bowles. It was one of his better games. I'm not going to go out on record and say it was his best game because he's coached so many games. But I just really like what I saw from Todd Bowles in that game as the head coach. And, I don't know if he can do this every week. Let's be real. You look at his track record, he's not capable of doing that. However, if he did, or even did half as good as he did in week one, the Bucs, they might win 8 or 9 games instead of 6 or 7, in my opinion. Now, they will play the Chicago Bears on Sunday, as you preference to there, as they'll host Justin Fields and the Bears. I think it'll be an interesting matchup. I think that the week one highs and lows are too overpowering, too much of a overreaction, if you will, from both sides. I'm not saying the Bears are great, but I'm damn sure not saying the Buccaneers are great either. And we know how these quarterbacks are when they play against the Buccaneers. An athletic quarterback usually eats, and we've seen it time in and time out. Every single game. We saw Taylor Heineke do it a few years ago. He can do it too. Daniel Jones will run on us. This guy is a true quarterback threat, a dual threat. And Justin Fields obviously did not have a good game last week, lost 38-20 at home against Green Bay with a new starting quarterback. Yeah, a quarterback not named Aaron Rodgers, but a guy by the name of Jordan Love. And the Bears got smacked. I mean, Justin Fields looked bad. The Bears looked bad. They had a terrible first half. They scored 6 points in the first half and gave up 10, so it was a close first half. But the second half, their defense was awful, giving up 28 points and losing that game 38-20. So, and 60 seconds or less, what's your expectation for this Buccaneers-Bears game here in Tampa Bay? I'll be able to go at that game, so I'm going to save my predictions for after you go.
Yeah, Buccaneers-Bears. I think Justin Fields makes a little bit of progress after the entire Bears team's getting called out. I'm going to say I don't think I foresee the Buccaneers throwing up 38 points. I'm going to say a 27 to 20 point victory. Buccaneers win that game, maybe a little bit higher for the Bucs. I just don't think Justin Fields is a great quarterback. The Bears defense is absolutely terrible at this point. They've lost every great piece besides Eddie Jackson, and he's not the same guy he was back in the day. So the Bears aren't great. I think the Bucs are a better team, especially defensively. But like you said, the threat of a mobile quarterback has always been something that hasn't been great for the Buccaneers in terms of stopping them. But I think a couple of years ago, maybe even been last year against Lamar Jackson, kind of gave me a little bit of hope for the Buccaneers in terms of stopping these mobile quarterbacks. Even though they ended up losing that game, I think defensively under Todd Bowles, they've gotten much better at that over the years. And the Buccaneers defense is a defense that's very opportunistic. They blitz the crap out of you. And if you fumble the football, they're going to hop on it first, and they're eventually going to get an interception this season. Again, obviously the first one this year was by the rookie Isian, and completely took the ball away from one of the Vikings receivers. But I think we're going to see some pressure for forced turnovers for the Buccaneers defensive backs. And I think Carlton Davis gets his hands on one on Sunday afternoon. The Bucs win by 7.
Well, I like that take. Carlton Davis, he typically gets his hands on the football a couple of times. He just doesn't bring it down. So maybe you'll have a pick. I like that Isian guy a lot. Undrafted rookie, had an incredible interception in the red zone, practically on the goal line, ripped it out of the receiver's hands. So that's my ball. I'm going to welcome you to the NFL, even though I'm the undrafted rookie. So rounding out the show with my projection here, I'm going to say that the Buccaneers, I don't know, I think they lose in heartbreaking fashion on Sunday. I think it could either be a blowout Bucs win or a heartbreaker for Tampa Bay at home, and I'm leaning more towards the heartbreaker. I'm going to say maybe 31-28, a close loss. Now, if the Bucs win, I think it's going to be a blowout. I think it'll be a 34-13 type game for the Buccaneers. I could see it going either way, but my gut tells me more of an upset. But how crazy would that be for the Buccaneers if they went off 2-0 heading into Monday night against the Eagles?
Yeah, the Bucs are going to put their all into this game because they're going up against the Eagles on Monday night, like you just said. That's obviously not going to be a victory for the Buccaneers, most likely. So you're heading into this game and you're saying, hey, we got to win this game because we're going to lose next week, most likely. But obviously, you're not saying that as a team, but you're kind of thinking that in the back of your mind. The Eagles are a great defense. Jesus, that team is amazing defensively. Jalen Hurts is going to pick it up in week 2. Didn't have a good week number 1. And they're going to be right back where they were last season, at least in the final 4 of the NFC teams, and maybe again in the Super Bowl. Obviously, it's hard to repeat even as a team that goes to the Super Bowl, even though they lost last season. It would be hard for them to make it again, but they are a better team than they even were last year. So the Buccaneers are going to put their all into this Bears game, and they expect to win on Sunday, and I think they're going to win this game. A lot of turnovers for Justin Fields in my mind heading into this Sunday night or Sunday afternoon.
All right, Spence, you talk about new quarterbacks across the NFL. I'll let you lead the way with this one. What do you got?
So I'm going to count Desmond Ridder as a new quarterback in the NFL as well. I think he's a game managing quarterback. I think he looked good for the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday. I think that's all they need really at the moment. Obviously, sadly for Atlanta Falcons fans, this guy's not the future for your team. He showed nothing special. Again, still hasn't shown anything special. It's his fifth start in the NFL. Hasn't shown one good play that's like out of the ordinary, out of your mind play. Doesn't even target Drake London. Barely throws the ball to Kyle Pitts. Obviously, it's designed, but they've got to get out of that funk as the season goes on if they want to win these close games. Because obviously, this week against a little bit of a bad opponent in the Carolina Panthers, it's kind of going to be easy to beat them if you run the football. Again, another one, Bryce Young didn't look great. Obviously, it's his first actual start in the NFL. The Falcons defense were all over him. Jesse Bates picked him off twice. I would say not a good start for his career. Didn't really show anything special either. Looked pretty bad on his deep throws, overthrew them by a ton. Anthony Richardson impressed me against the Jaguars. He looked really good, had them within 7, threw one of his bad interceptions late in that game. They end up losing. But again, they're down by 10 points. He has them in the red zone. Then he gets injured, taking a big hit, getting a first down. If he stays in that game, they lose by 3 points. Instead, they lose by 10. He looked good against a great team. A couple of other quarterbacks that made their debut. CJ Stroud of the Houston Texans looked all right. Another one, I would say, let's see, Sam Howell. Sam Howell versus the Arizona Cardinals was kind of a letdown for me. Just heading into the season, we heard a lot about how good this guy was going to be with Terry McLaurin, that receiving core. Didn't look great. They beat the Cardinals by only 4 points. Not special. But Jordan Love, on the other hand, against the Chicago Bears, obviously they own the Bears. That's been their thing for years, but that's usually Aaron Rodgers' thing. I think he looked good. Obviously, they're not. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers can't take you to the playoffs, is Jordan Love going to be able to take you to the playoffs? Not sure about that, but he looked good in week number 1. Jimmy Garoppolo with the Raiders is another one that I was kind of thinking. Obviously, not a brand new quarterback, but a new scheme for him again. And he looked pretty good in that game, a lot like Baker Mayfield with the Buccaneers. A very close game against the Denver Broncos. They won that one 17-16 against the Broncos. And the defense looked all right for the Raiders, which usually is not the case over the years. Down the stretch, they played great. And Jimmy Garoppolo on that 3rd and 6, just like Baker Mayfield on his final drive, put the shoulder down, got the first down, and won the game in the same fashion the Buccaneers won the game. So I think he looked good as well. And then just a bonus quarterback play that I kind of want to throw in there is Tua. Tua looked incredible against the Las Vegas Chargers. The Los Angeles Chargers. He looked great. And his connection with Tyreek Hill this season, that bold prediction of Tyreek Hill saying that his goal this year is to get 2,000 yards receiving and be the first one in NFL history. If they keep this up, which I think is a possibility for him to get 150 yards a game with Tua this year, I think that that's something that we may actually see for the first time ever, because that connection and the accuracy between those two, like the rapport, is maybe the best connection in football, at least in week 1 of this season. That touchdown to him, that fade touchdown that was literally dropped over the defender's helmet and into Tyreek Hill's arms without him even moving was insane. And this guy, if Tua doesn't get hurt, I think the Dolphins are a great contender in the AFC. And that connection is only going to get stronger as the season goes on. And I really like Tua as a quarterback. He looks like he's made strides in terms of stepping up in the pocket, moving around a little bit, something that we haven't seen in the past. But that's a guy to look out for this season, especially if you were lucky enough to get him in your draft and start him in week 1, because go back to last year, his first 8 weeks of the season, he was on a tear. MVP talks again. He got injured this year. If he doesn't get injured, are the Miami Dolphins one of the top 4 teams in the AFC now that the Jets are out? I think so.
Yeah, I would agree. And I thought that Tua played incredible. I thought that he protected his head as well, which is huge for him. And it sounds so crazy to have to say that, but truly, the guy's been hitting the head way too many times. One more, and not only is his career probably over with, but who knows what his life could be like in his actual health status. So, yeah, very excited to see Tyreek Hill do what he can do and do what we know he's capable of if Tua can stay healthy and get on the ball. But that's it for TCM Pod this week. We'll have another busy show next week, too. Hopefully no big quarterbacks go down like we saw with Aaron Rodgers on Monday night.
Yeah, next week, after the week 2 games, we're going to start our predictions for the games at the end of each show. I think that's something that we should continue. Obviously, want to get a feel for this season because we would have had a couple of these games going in different ways. We would have thought Aaron Rodgers goes off. Instead, Aaron Rodgers goes off the field and out for the year. So after week 2, I think we'll have a good feel of where some of these teams are offensively and defensively. Obviously, not everything is going to be shown in week number 1, because if week 1 was the end of the season, Joe Burrow is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, and the Bengals aren't even going to sniff the playoffs this season. So we'll get a better feel after this week and return with our week 3 pick'ems next Tuesday or Wednesday for you guys.
All right, sounds great. That's it for TCM Pod today. I appreciate you guys checking us out. Go like, comment, subscribe, share this video, share this podcast, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Download each and every episode. And when you're on YouTube, hit that little bell button right beside TCM Pod, our username, and that'll send notifications anytime and every time that we post a video. We appreciate you guys, and we'll be back next week.